IGs, Inspector Generals in charge of regular and administration police. All right, so we want to go back to our top story this morning. And like I mentioned, it has everything to do with that protest letter that was written by Jubilee against the judiciary, accusing it of a number of things, including biasness, being controlled by the National Super Alliance. Now, that open letter to the Chief Justice David Maraga outlines several instances which it feels the judiciary has been unfair to it, and even cites some of the judges whom it accuses of being tribally and politically inclined to the opposition. All right, so we just want to take a look, first of all, at the transfers. You'll remember that just a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago, of course, Chief Justice David Maraga transferred a number of judges, about 19 of them. And we'll start, of course, by taking a look at the high-profile judge, George Odunga. There you go, George Odunga. Now, he was, of course, serving here in Nairobi. He was actually the head of the Judicial Review Division, and he was transferred to Machakos. Now, there are many questions as to whether this transfer has anything to do with some of the rulings or orders that he gave last year during the electioneering period that was deemed to favor NASA on most instances. But there are critics who are saying that this is not the case, that these transfers are just very normal procedures. But we'll be talking about that. Remember also that Justice George Odunga was rewarded last year for heading the most efficient court station. That is just one of the things that he was really known for. And that last year, like I mentioned, Jubilee asked the CJ to remove Odunga from all August 8th election cases. The Jubilee Party did not want George Odunga to participate in any of the August 8th general election cases. So he has since been moved to Machakos. Moving on to Richard Mwongo, now been moved to Naivasha. Joel Ngugi, he's been moved to Nakuru. Moving on to the other set of judges who've been moved. Right, so you also have Lydia Achode. She has been moved, I beg your pardon, to Eldoret. And then you have Christine Meoli. She has been moved to Kiambu. All right, so let me now bring in my guests joining us from our City Center studio, Evans Ondieki. I think now we'll be able to communicate better. Evans, let's first of all start from these transfers. Do you read anything sinister from the transfer of, say, Justice George Odunga from Nairobi to Machakos, considering that this was one actually request that was made by Jubilee with regard to Justice George Odunga seemingly being inclined to the opposition?
I don't read much politics in the transfers because Odunga is a good judge. He's a good jurist. He has developed jurisprudence in his sector. And I think when he moves to Machakos, he moves with that experience. He takes he breathes new life to Machakos. So, and I think that is the best thing to happen to the judiciary. And once somebody has stayed in a station for more than 3 years or 4 years, it is normal for them to be transferred.
Right, so you don't read anything that is sinister with regard to this. But also just talking about and going back to the electioneering period last year, and Jubilee Party came out really strongly saying that they did not want him to handle any matters to do with the August 8th election.
Now, I think before, even Jubilee, before it complains, let them read his judgments, his rulings. His rulings are sound, they are based on law, they are based on the facts before him, and that is the essence of a good judge. He looks at the law, he looks at the facts, he looks at the circumstance, then he makes a determination. So we cannot just condemn a judge before you read what is the jurisprudence that informed his decision, what was the circumstance, the law, the facts. Then you are able to come up with a holistic approach to his decision. But if you criticize just because of his name, names, even you can have a name in South Africa which has a Kenyan connotation, but it has nothing to do with somebody's duties and responsibilities.
Right, and I want us to now delve deeper into that protest letter that was written by Jubilee Party yesterday. I'm sure you've been able to read through it. And one of the things that I want us to talk about first is the fact that Jubilee is accusing the Chief Justice of being biased, poor leadership, and double standards. Being a lawyer, what are your sentiments with regard to this? It was a strongly worded letter. I'm sure you read it. What are your sentiments about it?
Now, Betty, this is the most unfortunate because this is the height of arrogance by Laveri Tuchu. Number one, the judiciary is independent, and in execution of its mandate under our constitution, it is not subject to the control of anybody or authority under Article 160 of the Constitution. And that is a value that is reflected in Article 1, in Article 159, all over. It doesn't matter your status in society. What matters is that you must follow the rule of law and due process. And I think I wish to thank the CJA and the judiciary generally. They have lived their fate. They have lived according to their oath of office. They have followed the rule of law. They have never made calls to judges to influence their decision. And I think for that we must give Chief Justice Maraga credit, because Jubilee is complaining that he has not done certain things in a particular way. And that is exactly what we don't want. We want a judiciary that can be able to think independently, act independently, institutionally, financially, administratively, and individually as judges. They should not be subject to the control or authority of any person or institution. That is the value that we protect in our constitution. That is the meaning of the doctrine of separation of powers. That is what it means, that the sovereign power of the people of Kenya is spoken through the courts, through parliament, through county assemblies, and all those institutions play their individual roles to check and balance. Remember, Betty, absolute power, meaning power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So unless there are these inbuilt checks and balances, human beings are bound to abuse their power. Who will control them if the judiciary cannot control these institutions? So we believe strongly that the Maraga has done a good job, and I think that's why people are complaining.
Okay. Let's talk about the revisit, because that word revisit really has been used several times. You'll remember that President Uhuru Kenyatta said that, that issue to do with the judiciary will be revisited. And this came after the nullification of the August 8th presidential election. Let's just listen into what the president had to say at that time.
Mimi nimeshangaa kwa sababu nafikiri Kenya ndio nchi ya kwanza duniani, nchi ya kwanza ambao watu wachache ambao hawazidi 6 na kati yao 3 au 4 wameamua ya kwamba hawa ndio wana uwezo kushinda wananchi milioni 15 ambao walijitokeza kwa amani, ambao waliamuka mapema kupiga foleni waingize kura moja kwa moja kwa moja kwa moja kwa moja, na wakapiga kura 6. Kweli ama sio kweli? Si wengi wenu pia mlikuwa huko kila mtu kwa kituo chake? Kweli ama sio kweli? Na mlikuwa na maagency wenu huko kuangalia dunia inaenda namna gani? Kuna pahali ambapo mliona Wakenya wakipigana? Kuna pahali ambapo mliona Wakenya wakifurugana? In peace. Lining kupiga kura. Watu 4 ati ndio watakuja waseme kulikuwa technicality. Ati wananchi milioni 15 hawatarudia kura 6, watarudia kura 1. Sasa wewe jamani, hata ukiwa mjinga namna gani, jiulize. MCA amepigiwa kura, imekuwa transmitted. Mama County amepigiwa kura, imekuwa transmitted. Hamuna mtu ameuliza swali. Mjumbe amepigiwa kura, imekuwa transmitted. Kuna mtu amesema wameapishwa wote. Senator amepigiwa kura, imekuwa transmitted. Kuna mtu amesema lolote. Governor amepigiwa kura, imekuwa transmitted. Lakini kura ya rais iko na shida. Hata imekuwa transmitted. Iko na shida, transmission iko na shida. Na huyo mtu mwenyewe ndio ametuma majaji kila kona, 47 counties, ati kushuhudia kuapishwa kwa magavana. Wacha nicheke kwa sababu nafikiri kwa sababu ya hizo nguo wanavaa wanaona Wakenya wengine ni wajinga. Explain to me. Explain to me. Jamani. Kiwacha tuseme tu ni wapenda amani, kwa sababu kama sio wapenda amani wangeona cha mtema kuni. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Mimi nilikuwa kwa my sister hapa Bonet, nimeona amevaa gauni mzima hapo, alikuwa na tumbo imekuwa imefika hapa. Akisimamia kusaini makaratasi ya Laboso. Lakini sasa and I have always said we have a problem with our judiciary, but regardless we respect, but we shall revisit. We shall respect, but we shall revisit this agenda. Oh yes, we shall.
All right, so that's, of course, last year, the president, of course, reacting to the nullification of the August 8th presidential election. As you can see, did not really go down well with the executive, with the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, vowing to revisit. I want to bring in Evans Sundieke. Evans, do you think that this letter and even the, the seeming attack on the judiciary is this revisit that the president is here?
No, Betty, I think we have to contextualize this situation. I think Tuchu has misapprehended the values and the principles that inform our constitutionalism. The president is entitled to his opinion. He reacted. It was within his right to react the way he reacted. But the president is also a subject of the Constitution. He is governed by the Constitution, which creates the doctrine of separation of powers. So I believe strongly that the president will respect the institutions, he will respect the Constitution, which he has sworn to protect, promote, and preserve. And I believe strongly that our judiciary is strong because of the ruling it made on 1st of August. And the president derives his legitimacy from this ruling of the Supreme Court, which confirmed that he was properly re-elected in the line of elections. So you cannot separate these processes. They are one and the same transaction, right from 8th of August, from the ruling of the Supreme Court of 1st, and the subsequent ruling of the Supreme Court, which confirmed the elections of the president. So if you try to separate those rulings, then you miss the point. The point is that our democracy is developing, our institutions are getting strengthened by virtue of the challenges they have faced, and we can only test the Constitution and our laws if we subject them to realities on the ground. The reality was the election petition, the reality was the second rerun, and the judiciary has no business trying to tell a party on what to do in a process, in a legal process. The court waits until a party goes to court to make a case. If they have not gone to court, the court cannot make a pronouncement. So we cannot criticize the judiciary by saying they have never given a comment. No, they don't deserve to give any comment because the judiciary is impartial, is independent and impartial. They should preserve their independence, their impartiality by waiting until a party goes to court. That is the value protected under Article 50, Clause 1. If there is a dispute and a party goes to court, then the court has a duty to adjudicate that matter to final conclusion.
Right, but also just talking about the court processes and then coming, of course, in the backdrop of this protest letter that was written yesterday, do you think that indeed Raphael Tuju can act separately from the executive right now, which really is the head of the Jubilee Party?
What makes the letter from Raphael Tuju very awkward is that he's now a cabinet. He's a minister without portfolio, so he's a member of the executive. And he's also the Secretary General of the ruling party. That is why the letter is so awkward. I think whoever advised Tuju to write that letter, that was a total misapprehension of our constitutionalism. That letter should be withdrawn, and Raphael Tuju should apologize to the judiciary and to Kenyans, because his outburst will not have no place in a democracy which is governed by the rule of law and due process, where people respect institutions. That's why we now respect the presidency. We know there is one president, and we respect that. It is because of the constitution. So Tuju cannot have his cake and eat it. So I think for wisdom, he should withdraw that letter immediately, apologize to the judiciary and to Kenyans, because where he's heading to is dangerous territory. I don't think he has capacity to manage the kind of events, or he can even contemplate the full consequences of his actions. I don't think he appreciates them.
But that's my question.
Out of ignorance and out of lack of appreciation. Yes.
But that really is my question, because do you think that he would act independently, that this letter did not, have, a blessing from the executive? Do you think that this letter that is really questioning the authenticity of the judiciary can really come out without the blessing of the executive?
I think, to be honest, Tuju has to carry this cross, because he has signed the letter, he has alluded certain things, and I think Jubilee has very good legal minds. They ought to have consulted, because you look for the best lawyer when you have an issue that is vexing. But when you go and express an opinion and you write a letter which is permanent to another arm of government, that is actually undermining democracy, that is undermining the rule of law, and that flies on the face of our constitutionalism. It's not acceptable in any democracy, and that should be the basic thing. Yeah.
So we'll take a short commercial break, but we are coming back right now to continue with the conversation with lawyer Evans Ondieki. We will be really talking about the specific